Well, it's a good news Wednesday today. Israel killed two top terrorists on Tuesday, the first one in Lebanon, the second one in Iran. I'll have all the information on what we know so far and what the implications are for going ahead coming up on In Focus. Welcome to another In Focus with Caroline on the road. Today I'm in beautiful Northwest Indiana. So as the day progressed today, the news became better and better after a pretty sorry day in terms of news on Monday in Israel. So on Tuesday, in the afternoon hours in the United States, in the evening in Israel, we received words that there had been a large explosion in Beirut and that it looked like the Hezbollah's number two man, the top military commander for their terror forces, a man named Fuad Shukr, had been killed in Beirut, in the Dafia quarter of Beirut, in broad daylight by a missile attack from Israel. And Israel was very quick to announce that he was dead, which was interesting. We'll get to that in a second. So it works out that Shukr was the top guy in Hezbollah, aside from Nasrallah, not very well known, 62 years old. He was officially titled Hassan Nasrallah's military advisor, but according to information that came out in the hours following his assassination in Beirut, we discovered as well that he worked as the chief of staff of Hezbollah's terror forces in Lebanon. He was responsible for the precision-guided weapons program that includes missiles, that includes drones, that includes rockets that they've been fielding against Israel to such lethal purpose over the past 10 months. And so he is a very, very, very major character. He was also a member of their Jihad Council. So he's a major terrorist. And not only that, he's been wanted by the United States for 41 years because in 1983, Shukr was Imad Magnia's deputy in carrying out the bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut. 241 Marines were killed in that suicide bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut. And that was in October of 1983. He has been wanted by the United States ever since. There was a $5 million bounty on his head. Very interesting to know whether the United States is going to pay Israel for that. At any rate, the United States did not get its hands on him for 41 years, and Israel targeted him and killed him today. He was also apparently directly responsible for the massacre of the 12 children who were murdered in a rocket attack in Majd al-Shams over the weekend on Saturday. So he may or may not, he is attributed to him the murder of those 12 children. He was killed today in Beirut. He was wanted by the United States, etc. And then in the middle of the night, Israel time, late at night in the United States, we got word that Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas's top political boss, who lives in Doha or lived in Doha, was killed in Tehran this evening, Tehran time, in his guest house where he was staying. And by the way, this was an undisclosed location in northern Tehran, not in one of the fancy hotels in Tehran, because he's under threat of assassination from Israel. And yet Israel was able to put its hands on him. He was apparently also killed by a precision-guided missile that entered into the window of the bedroom where he was located. His bodyguard was also killed. And this was in the Iranian capital of Tehran. And Ismail Haniyeh was visiting in Tehran because he was a guest at the inauguration of Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian. So Pezeshkian was inaugurated yesterday. Haniyeh was photographed with Iranian dictator Ali Khamenei, along with the chief of the Islamic Jihad terrorist organization. So the two arch terrorists were with Khamenei, and then the next day he was killed in a guest house where he was staying in Tehran, along with his bodyguard. So he's dead too. That has significant implications as well. Obviously, Yahya Sinwar is the Hamas commander on the ground in Gaza, but Ismail Haniyeh preceded him as the leader of Hamas on the ground in Gaza, and then he left for Doha to be in charge of Hamas's so-called political bureau, which is in charge both of their international operations and of their political warfare campaigns against Israel, together with Qatar and Iran. He's a frequent visitor in Iran, and of course lived in Doha, where apparently he amassed a fortune of some $4 billion, according to media reports about him. So he was a billionaire. He was killed in Tehran after participating in the inauguration of Iran's new president. And these are very important. Obviously, they're good news, but they give us a glimpse into how Israel is fighting right now, when we're under pressure from the International Court of Justice, when we're under pressure from the International Criminal Court. Most importantly, we're under pressure from the Harris-Biden administration, which, immediately after the massacre of the children, the Americans did not condemn the attack in Majdan Shams in the Golan Heights. It took 24 hours or more for Kamala Harris to condemn the massacre of the children in Majdan Shams, and an equal amount of time for Biden, apparently, to condemn what had happened. So they were not in a rush to condemn what happened. Amos Hochstein, who has been trying to mediate a deal that I discussed at length in my interview with Tony Badran that was aired yesterday. He has been trying to force Israel to accept a deal with Hezbollah that would give us a deal with Hezbollah that there's no way to enforce, in terms of them ceasing their fire or removing their troops to 7 to 10 kilometers north of the border with Israel. And in exchange, we would be giving an enormous amount of not only sovereign territory, but strategically vital territory, particularly Mount Dov in the Golan Heights, which controls all of northern Israel. And there are also claims by U.S. officials that Tony cited that the United States also expects Israel not to deploy forces to the border with Lebanon. So this is crazy stuff, and that's what the U.S. policy is, because the United States has been treating Lebanon and Hezbollah as its own assets, and has been blocking Israel from attacking either for the past nine and a half months since the beginning of the war. So that's been the consistent American policy until now. So what are the implications of Shukr, first of all, of his assassination in Beirut today, going forward with dealing with the Hezbollah threat and the American effective support for Hezbollah against Israel in its handling and its management of the war? And obviously, and how does the Hania thing play into it? So first of all, what we've learned is, if we want to actually talk about the phase of the war that we're seeing now in terms of Israel's operations, not in Gaza, but outside of Gaza, towards Iran's other proxies, whether it's Hezbollah or Hania, the leader of Hamas outside of Gaza, or Shukr in Beirut. So the way to look at this is to start it actually with Israel's hit on the port in Yemen after the Houthis in Yemen attacked Tel Aviv, not far from the U.S. consulate in Tel Aviv, and killed an Israeli in his apartment building while he was asleep just a few weeks ago. So Israel responded to that assault by the Houthis on Tel Aviv, which was a massive escalation on their part in terms of their war against Israel, which has been mainly maritime-based in the Red Sea, owing to their control of the Bab el-Mandeb, which controls approaches to the Red Sea. And so they shot this missile at Tel Aviv, and Israel wasn't prepared for it, and we didn't shoot it down, apparently, or it was a drone, and Israel apparently had misidentified it as a friendly drone, so probably an American drone, and so Israel did not shoot it down en route, and it reached its target. If the target had been the former U.S. embassy, the present U.S. consulate in Tel Aviv, it missed that, but it got very close, and it killed this Israeli civilian in his apartment. So Israel responded to that attack on Tel Aviv by bombing the port of Hodeidah in Yemen, and that port over a week later is still on fire. So that was a major strike. It was an airstrike. It was surgical. Went in and out. It was massive, but it was surgical. Israel attacked, and then it left. It caused maximum damage that it could. It got a massive amount of bang for that buck of the airstrike. It showed its capabilities. It showed that it knows where to hit and to hit hard and to cause maximum damage, and then it left, right? So that was the first one. And then you had the Shukr. Why was he significant specifically? He was wanted by the United States, and here is the United States pursuing a policy of protecting Hezbollah against Israel. Hochstein and the White House and the State Department all saying after the massacre of the children of Majid al-Shams that they expected Israel not to attack in Beirut. Again, we had reports from solid Lebanese sources to the Lebanese media saying that Hochstein, Biden's envoy in these crazy talks trying to force Israel's capitulation to Hezbollah, that he was actually giving information to the Lebanese in recent weeks regarding Israel's targeting plans in Lebanon, what we're planning on shooting before we carried them out. So he's using information that Israel is sharing with the United States, our ostensible ally in the fight against Hezbollah, in order to tip off Hezbollah, be careful, Israel's coming after you. And then the United States responded by saying, don't attack any targets in Beirut. Beirut is off limits. You're not allowed to attack in Beirut. Why? Because that's a place that Hezbollah really, thinks is important. It's symbolic. It's got all of its assets there. It's got its command and control there. We don't want you to harm any targets of strategic value to Hezbollah. Essentially, that's what I mean when you say we don't want to go after Beirut. And by the way, the whole distinction, as Tony pointed out so clearly in our conversation, between Lebanon, a fictitious country, and Hezbollah, the terror organization / army / regime that swallowed Lebanon whole along with Iran, right, is insane, because nobody in Lebanon does anything except at Hezbollah's pleasure, whether they like it or not. And many of them like it. Okay, so you have to bear that in mind as well. They make this artificial distinction between Lebanon, the state, which again doesn't really exist, and Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, when it's not an organization. It's an army, it's a regime, it's a parasite, whatever you want to call it, but it's not just a little organization. It controls a country. And it transformed all of Lebanon into a forward operating base of Iran against Israel, just as, by the way, Hamas did in Gaza. So you have these areas, these theaters of war that are all owned by Iran through its proxies, and that also includes Yemen. And until now, they've been effectively protected by the United States, that has been gunning for them, preventing Israel from taking concerted action against Lebanon, taking any action against the Houthis except for defensive action. So Israel went in Hodeidah, blew up the port and some other things. It's still burning. They haven't recouped their losses. They haven't attacked Israel, I don't believe, since then. So this is really important stuff. And by the way, the United States, which we'll get to in a second, followed suit and together with Britain attacked targets in Yemen afterwards. But Shukr was important because on the one hand, the United States told us not to go after targets in Beirut. And on the other hand, we chose a target in Beirut that they can't object to because he's wanted by the United States because he murdered 241 Americans. So they can't come at us in a negative way for the attack, even though it was done against their demands and against their very clear stipulated call for Israel not to attack. So they can't blame us for doing what we did, because the target was somebody that the United States wanted to whack and hadn't for 41 years, but there was this big prize on his head. And there we went and we earned that prize money. So they can't come after us. It was a very important target for that reason, and also because it makes the case very clearly and graphically that Hezbollah is not an American, that Hezbollah is an American enemy, that you can't, act as a mediator and place Israel and Hezbollah on the same level, because Israel is America's ally. Look, the Israelis just killed this guy who murdered 241 Marines, and the other guy was the guy who killed 241 Marines. So you can't compare them or draw moral equivalence between the two. It's very, very important. The same was true with Haniyeh. Now, Haniyeh is from Gaza. He lives in Doha, which is again an American. They designated Qatar, which is it's second to Iran only as a state sponsor of terrorism, but the United States designated Qatar under Biden as a major non-NATO ally. Okay, and they renewed the lease or the rental contract or whatever on Udeid Air Base, which controls all of America's CENTCOM's air traffic throughout the Middle East, which is crazy. They did that in the middle of the war while Qatar is acting as a state sponsor for Hamas. All that being said, Israel didn't kill him in Qatar, although Israel could have. Israel killed him in Tehran. And this is important because the fact that he was located in Tehran when he was eliminated also draws very closely, very, very clearly, the ties between Hamas and Iran. What was he doing in Tehran? Why was he at the inaugural for Pezeshkian, the new president of Iran? What was Haniyeh doing there? Why is it so important? Why did he meet with Khamenei the day before he was killed? Because he is an Iranian proxy. That's why. And so the idea that Hamas is somehow or another a Palestinian nationalist group, and the only reason that they murdered 1,200 Israelis on October 7th with great sadism and kidnapped 250 is because, they don't have a nation, they don't have a state. The fact that Hamas, of course, it's a lie, because Hamas has controlled Gaza, which has been an independent state, free of all Israeli presence for the past almost 19 years, since August. It's 19 years, right? This month it turns 19. They've had an independent state in Gaza since August of 2004. So they've had independence, and Hamas has been the regime of this independent Palestinian entity in Gaza for the past 19 years. But, their apologists, particularly in the West, but also, in the Arab world, particularly in the West, insist that Hamas is really a terrorist organization, or that they only murdered babies and raped women, etc., and decapitated men because, they're freedom fighters fighting for national liberation or some nonsense. And so, by killing Haniyeh in Tehran, of all places, while he was there on an official visit, right, as an official proxy of the Iranian regime, Israel was making continued attempts to deny Hamas's subordinate position and dependence on Iran much more difficult to make. So that was also very significant, that he was killed in Iran. And all of these things are, and by the way, after Shukr was killed in Beirut, again, just as the United States followed on the bombing of the Hodeidah port by the Israel Air Force with its own attacks together with the British against Houthi targets in Yemen. So after Shukr was assassinated by Israel in Beirut, the United States carried out airstrikes in Iraq against Iranian militia, Iranian-controlled Iraqi militia in Baghdad and in Karbala. So the United States is following Israel's lead here, and you could say on the one hand it's because they're trying to do it under the radar. Everybody's talking about Israel strikes, so the United States can get away with a freebie. They're sort of a rider on Israel's strike, so they're trying to avoid media attention. Or on the other hand, it may be embarrassing to them that Israel, which is supposed to be an asset of the United States, is taking the lead in these things, and so they're attacking these targets in Yemen and in Iraq in order not to look like cowards. So that's another take. But the point is that Israel is very clearly leading on this issue, and the United States is placed in a position where it's very difficult for them not to be on the offensive as well against Iran's assets. This doesn't mean that Israel is trying to, as some of the isolationists in the United States insist, that Israel's trying to drag the United States into war. Not at all. These are entities in Iraq and in Yemen that are striking against the United States. So it's not like Israel, but they haven't done anything, and they've allowed the threat to grow and grow and grow because Biden has this insane idea, or Harris has this insane idea, or the whole Democratic Party has this insane idea that you can cut a deal with Iran by appeasing it, by giving a free pass essentially to its terrorist proxies, and by reigning in Israel. So that's one of the things that's very important, that these, so on the one hand, it's an in and out, very short, brief thing. And on the other hand, it has been followed, at least in 2 occasions, by American operations against the same enemies or similar enemies in terms of the Iraqi militia that have also been attacking Israel. So that's also important. And here what we really see is that Israel is using these strikes to try to expand its diplomatic maneuver room and legitimacy, because we're facing a deficit of that. We're being hounded everywhere, being criminalized everywhere, because the United States is essentially, under Biden and Harris, has been implementing a policy that draws a moral equivalence between Israel and Iran, or even worse, between Israel and Hezbollah and Hamas, with Iran being immune from any criticism or accountability of any kind. And Israel needs to expand that diplomatic maneuver room, because this is a real war. This isn't something that is just a tit for tat. Oh, you massacred 12 babies, 12 children, 12 young children and teenagers on the soccer field on a Saturday afternoon in the Golan Heights, and then we just attack one terror master. Like, that's not even a reasonable equation. But it's important for what it does for Israel by degrading the capabilities of these organizations, which is important, but tactical, I think, probably not strategic. And it's important from a strategic perspective in the sense that it expands Israel's diplomatic maneuver room, particularly vis-a-vis the Harris-Biden administration, which is sort of in a position where they have to back what Israel is doing, as we saw, despite the fact that Israel didn't do what the United States said and actually did operate in Beirut. So that was important. But the whole thing, the only reason why any of this is important was brought home very clearly, I think, shortly before Shukr was assassinated. Hezbollah, shortly after, not quite clear, Hezbollah shot a rocket at Goshrim kibbutz in the Upper Galilee, and it murdered near Popko, a 28-year-old farmer from Hagoshrim. Popko was reportedly, he had just come home from shopping, and he was getting out of his car. He's getting out of his car, and he's killed by a rocket that was shot by Hezbollah from Lebanon. And his murder, along with the massacre of the children in Majdal Shams, makes clear that, this isn't a political problem. This is a military problem, right? There is no political solution to a military problem. There's only a military solution to the problem. And the military solution to the problem is that Hezbollah's forces have to be massively diminished. Not only do its ground force have to be killed in large numbers and moved away from Israel's borders, but its missile arsenal has to be massively diminished. Again, just to cite from last week, a report that the Iranians told the Kuwaitis that they had transferred EMP devices, electromagnetic pulse bombs, ordnance, to Hezbollah to be used against Israel to fry our electrical our electric grid, which is an existential threat to life in Israel. So they're making these claims, right? And they're killing our people with these rockets that can't be intercepted by Iron Dome, by these drones that we don't see or misidentify. And also earlier in the day, before Shukr was assassinated, absolutely before Shukr was assassinated, Hezbollah shot drones at the Karish oil platform, which is massively important economic resource of Israel. It's not only Israel's natural gas supply, but it's also for export. So this would, if it's hit, it would be a massive blow to Israel's economy. And so they're threatening our most our most vital civilian infrastructure, our energy infrastructure. They're murdering our citizens. They're attacking our military bases, right, including our air control bases, etc., in Iran, and many other very sensitive sites. They're attacking them. That has to stop. It can't go on. They have an effective security zone inside of Israel because they've forced 80,000 Israelis to flee from their homes, fearing Hezbollah invasion after October 7th. We have 80,000 Israelis who are living as internal refugees in hotels, and they can't come home until that threat of Hezbollah is massively degraded. And obviously, no deal by Hofstein, who is tipping Lebanon reportedly off to Israel's targeting information, was really mad at us for carrying out this strike in Beirut, and probably would have condemned us more outspokenly if it hadn't been somebody on the top of the FBI's most wanted list, right? So that's really important. And the other thing to bear in mind, as Mark Levin reported earlier this week, he gave the whole list of the munitions that the Biden-Harris or the Harris-Biden administration has been withholding from Israel for months now. So this includes 120 millimeter tank ammunition, 120 millimeter mortar ammunition, medium tactical vehicles, medium air-to-air vehicles, F-15s, F-35 engines, JDAM, Joint Direct Attack munitions. Those are the bombs, the big bombs, 84 2,000-pound bombs, rifles for the Israeli police. Obviously, they're saying we're hurting Palestinians in Samaria, and therefore the police can't have rifles. They're denying us 338 medium machine guns and guided missile systems. So, how do you go to war without this stuff? You go to war by doing Dresden, right? I mean, that's essentially what they're saying. Just bomb the hell out of them because we're not giving you any precision-guided missiles. We're not going to give you the means to carry out the kind of surgical attacks that we demand that you do. So you're just going to have to kill a lot of people, and then you'll be tried as war criminals in The Hague, and we're going to support it, and blah, 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 blah. And, of course, we're not going to take any action against the International Criminal Court. We're not going to sanction them or anything like that for going after your prime minister and defense minister and all of the soldiers in Europe. Not going to do that. So we have to, these strikes are great. They show intelligence superiority. I mean, major, like the fact that I saw somebody on Twitter point out the fact that Israel was the one, not Hezbollah, that announced that Shukr was killed, and that we could say that with certainty shows just how incredible our intelligence is, right? That we could make that kind of statement. They immediately cordoned off the area where he had been assassinated right after they hit, and so we obviously had somebody on the ground in the Dafia section of Beirut, which is Hezbollah's stronghold, telling the people in Jerusalem that the guy's dead, right? Because otherwise Israel wouldn't have put this out. We had a credible source on the ground in Beirut. That's an incredible mastery from an intelligence perspective. It's also, speaks to our continued air superiority. It's true that they have rockets that are able to penetrate Israeli airspace, and Israel hasn't been able to stop them. But look what we can do, right? So I mean, we can shoot a missile through a window. That's pretty incredible, and we can do that in Tehran also. The thing is that we're threading a needle here. We have to go to this major war in Lebanon. There's no doubt about it. But we're threading a needle because we need this exceedingly hostile Harris-Biden administration to finally send us the weapons that Congress approved for Israel and that Biden signed into law. And they're not doing it now in breach of the Impoundment Act. We need to fight this war, and this is a war that they want us to lose. We need to fight it and win it, and they don't want us to fight it, and they want us to lose the war by accepting, surrender deals with Hamas and with Hezbollah. So we need to maintain American support. We can't embarrass them too much, but we need also to show our enemies that we're not an American satrapy, so that when the United States comes out publicly and says Israel. And they say, Israel, don't do anything in Beirut. By operating in Beirut, we're saying we're not a satrapy, that we don't follow American orders. America can order us around, even though to a certain degree, America can order Israel around because Israel is waiting with bated breath for the weapons to arrive. I mean, I think I argued last week, and my sense was overall that one of the main strategic purposes of Netanyahu's visit to Washington, including his speech to Congress, which went over so well, was to force the administration's hand that they have to give us the weapons that they promised to us. So, here we are. We need these weapons, and we need the Biden administration to give them to us, and so we can't get them too mad. We can't be beholden to them, because otherwise everybody will say that we're Satra people. We can't disrespect them, because otherwise they'll have a reason or further justification in their non-justification way to stand with Hezbollah and Hamas against Israel. So, and not give us the weapons that we need in order to fight the war to victory. So all of these things are kind of like baked into the broth whenever we do something. So we have to get those weapons. We have to have the, sense of legitimacy. And so the Hudaydah raid did it in one way. The attack against Shukr in Beirut, the guy who was on the FBI's wanted list, did it in another way. The Hania in Tehran did it in another way, but they're all sort of geared towards that thing, and it's very important because it makes it all well nigh impossible for the Harris-Biden administration not to support Israel. And indeed, both of them put out statements that were supportive of Israel and mentioned the fact that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. I didn't see any direct comment about the Haniyeh attack yet from the White House, except to say that they heard the news, so they hadn't said anything yet by the time that I was taping this. And this attack on Haniyeh, some people are saying that it's going to stop the negotiations on the hostages that Israel's been carrying out with Hamas, with U.S. mediation. And, that's possible, but that isn't that big a deal in the sense that those negotiations weren't going to lead to anything, because Hamas doesn't want to deal with Israel, right? They don't want a deal that doesn't involve total Israeli capitulation. So they're not interested in one. They keep getting that humanitarian aid, which now includes everything from food and water and medicine to cigarettes and CDs and consumer goods and in many cases weapons that Israel has intercepted on the way. What didn't we intercept in the 40,000 trucks that have already made their way to Gaza? It's anybody's guess or anybody's nightmare or anybody's death. And we'll just have to see how that goes. But, why, if they're fat and happy, would they make a deal with us, especially when they see the way that the United States is bearing down on Israel to capitulate? So there wasn't going to be a deal anyway, which is why Hamas keeps changing its demands, because they don't want one. So they might want one now, right? I mean, Yahya Sinwar, he may be intercepting the diapers that are coming into Gaza, because he needs them himself, because he's peeing in his pants and all that. And it's possible, and he may be more willing to make a deal now than he was in the past, because he's scared because Hania is dead. It's possible. It's possible that the people inside of Gaza are very worried now because of what happened with Haniyeh and what happened with Shukr, etc., and they'll be more willing to make a deal. So right now, as things stand, or as things stood before Tuesday's hits, there wasn't going to be a deal. So if they use the hit as an excuse not to make a deal, that's fine. They were going to make one anyway. So we're neither better nor worse off than we were before in terms of getting hostages out through diplomacy with Hamas. And on the other hand, if it is going to have an impact, it may have a positive impact because it scares them so much. They may be willing to make a better deal from an Israeli perspective. So we'll have to see. But I think on balance, it's probably good for the hostages that we did this. And I think it's very important because it may stabilize Israel politically. And that's the last thing that I want to talk about today. So Zach, my producer, contacted me right after I finished taping In Focus this morning. And he told me about the Shukr raid. And I said, okay, wait, so maybe we shouldn't run this particularly In Focus. Why don't we maybe do a different one? So the one that I taped this morning was about what happened, the main news on Sunday, which was that the military advocate general in the IDF, who's obviously a radical leftist member of the legal fraternity, had issued urgent arrest orders against 10 IDF reservists in a unit called Unit 100 that is in charge of securing the imprisonment of Hamas terrorists who are being held at Sde Iman, a base abutting very close to the Gaza Strip. And so they're accused of abusing some terrorists from the Nukhba. Is apparently a company commander in the Nukhba that was not only involved with the atrocities of October 7th, but he was also involved with training other terrorists who were subordinate to him and carrying them out in the months that preceded the invasion of Israel and the slaughter of 1,200 Israelis and the kidnapping of another 250. So this guy had been held in Ofer security prison. He started a riot there, and so the police called up the army and said, no, you have to bring him over to Sde Iman, which is under military control. And according to the attorneys for the reservists who were arrested, this terrorist started trying to seize their taser guns in the vehicle on the way to Sde Iman. There was some violence there between him and them, and he never filed a complaint against them, etc. At a certain point, not clearly clear in the chronology, he was hospitalized. The doctors found some damage to his rectum, and there are various assessments about how that happened. So the claim that he made is that they sodomized him. Another claim that I read said that he was, if anything, sodomized by other prisoners. But another claim was that, and there's no evidence that the Israelis did anything. And then another claim is that when he was being moved from Ofer prison to Sde Iman, he was hiding a cell phone in his rectum, and that the damage to his rectum was caused by that. So, there are all of these things, but the real question is, why are they in broad daylight sending masked men from the CID of military police into Sde Iman to arrest these fighters in the IDF who have had the sorry task of having to guard these mass murderers in holding pens? And that really, it speaks to a larger phenomenon that we've seen in recent weeks, where you have the legal fraternity, whether it's a Supreme Court that's been taking on these cases that are just delusional, made by these anti-Zionist NGOs petitioning the court on behalf of Hamas terrorists for more commercial goods under the headline humanitarian aid going into Gaza, or better conditions for the terrorists being held in Israeli prisons, etc. And the Supreme Court is taking these cases, and in some cases they're adjudicating on behalf of the terrorists. In some cases they haven't made decisions yet, but this is the radical left petitioning to the radical left against the state of Israel, against the people of Israel, against the IDF, over and over and over again. And then you have the military advocate general going to war against the war fighters in the IDF. At the end of June, she ordered the arrest of two reservists who had gone on their own with nobody calling them on October 7th to go save people from the slaughter in southern Israel. And they were arrested under charges that they killed a Nukhba terrorist on October 7th. The whole thing was insane. The judge threw it out, sent them home. But she's going after these soldiers and treating them like terrorists. And the question is, why are they doing it? And part of it is that she, just like the Attorney General are doing it because they want to protect themselves from the ICC. They want to protect themselves, which is going after, our political leaders and our war fighters. So they want to protect themselves from these international kangaroo courts at the Hague. Another reason is because they want to maintain their power. They have been pushing this idea that they are Israel's security blanket, or what's it called, bulletproof vest, right? That's supposed to protect us from the international courts that are going after us, because of this principle that they refer to as complementarity, where we prove to them that we have a legal system that's really awesome, and then they're not going to go after us in their kangaroo courts. But see, they already rejected that claim. The ICC rejected it. The ICJ rejected it. And the prosecutions that Israel is going through in the International Court of Justice for genocide when it was Hamas, that is a genocidal terrorist organization, carried out a one-day genocide on October 7th and would do it, to the nth degree and kill all the Jews as they're bound to by their covenant if they could. So we're being accused of being them. We're being accused of being Hamas, essentially. So that's at the ICJ, and at the ICC, we're being accused of deliberately starving the Gazans when, they get over 3,000 calories a day, which is more than people who live in the vast majority of countries on Earth, according to the UN itself. So the UN's International Criminal Court wants to issue arrest warrants against our leaders because of an imagined crime that it's obvious we're not committing. And they are committing it. They're deliberately starving the hostages. So that's what's happening on that score as well. And so here we are in this weird situation where they're trying to prove that they have to have all of this excess power because of complementarity when the people that are supposed to be accepting the complementarity already are not. So they've been proven wrong, but they want to maintain this fiction because it's a way to justify their continued arrogation of the powers that were not bestowed to them by the Knesset, whether it's the executive powers and the legislative powers of the government and the Knesset, or the moral powers of the Israeli people to determine, whether who are the heroes of our country. So that's what they're doing, and they're causing massive damage. They're causing massive damage to Israel because they're demoralizing the public, which has been rioting at these military bases, demanding that these soldiers be released immediately, and then criminalized for doing so, even though all they're doing is the same thing that the left-wing protesters have been doing for the past year and a half, if not longer, to try to oust the government through extra democratic means, through mob violence on the streets of Israel and anarchy. So they're attacking the Israelis who are protesting the way that our heroes are being treated when they're ignoring the fact that they're ignoring how our legal fraternity is ignoring the sentiments of the public. So they're demoralizing the public, but they're also aiding in the criminalization. I saw a report the State Department was asked about what happened at State Teman on Tuesday, and the spokesman was saying, we're watching it very worried. We're very worried. They have to punish anybody who mistreats prisoners, right? Mistreats terrorists, right? And so they're giving legitimacy to claims that Israel is a criminal state, that our soldiers, our heroes, are criminals, and they're doing it deliberately because they think it's going to help them maintain power in Israel. And it's very depressing. So why does what happened on Tuesday in terms of the killing of Shukr and Hania have an impact on that? I think there's a very big possibility that Netanyahu is going to be able to expand his government. He can bring in maybe a Victor Lieberman after the assassinations, and if not Lieberman, with his 13 members of Knesset, then Gideon Sa'ar with his 3 members of Knesset, and that would go a long way, either of them, towards stabilizing the coalition. That's something that Netanyahu ardently desires. You can look to the north and to the prospect of war with Hezbollah as another reason why Benny Gantz might want to come back into the government and have another emergency government. Benny Gantz right now is trailing Netanyahu in every poll, well, not every poll, in consistent tracking polls, by direct polls, by double digits. And he's not doing well in the head-to-head polls that are being carried out by the leftist pollsters either. So he doesn't have any unique contribution to make to Israeli politics as the head of a relatively minor opposition party. And he's sinking like a stone in the polls as a result of that. So he has a reason to want to go back into the government, and so that stabilizes the situation. And really what you find is that the legal fraternity comes out from behind rocks and starts causing this kind of mayhem and anarchy in the streets by expressing its contempt for democracy, for the public, for the government, for the sentiments of the public. Whenever there's anarchy, whenever there's a sense that the political reins are loosening, that the leadership is weak. So if these 2 hits today can expand the government, that's also very important moving forward with the war in Lebanon. So we'll have to see. All in all, Tuesday was a good day. And we can only hope for more of them. And we can hope that from this success, we build further success and further success. Obviously, we still have a target-rich environment. I'm thinking Nasrallah. I'm thinking Yahya Sinwar richly deserve, a guided missile in their bedroom window as well. We'll just have to see how things play out. But we should at least revel in the fact that we demonstrated some real capabilities. We took out some significant targets, and hopefully we've started a virtuous circle that's going to go to good places. So those are my thoughts for today, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.